Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all members of the Radley community and to any of our school partners who've joined us today on Zoom. My name is Caroline Monaghan and I'm responsible for our new Beyond Radley speaker programme, a series of talks designed to give you an insight into the world of work. We'll bring you 3 of these talks a week on various career paths or in broader concepts like entrepreneurism or the value of networking. If there are any specific careers that you would like to hear about, then please do feel free to email me. All of our talks are recorded, and if you're interested in watching the videos, then they're on the Radley video area of our website. I'm shortly going to hand you over to our guest speaker, Henry Hereford, but before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute. If you wish to ask a question during the talk, that's absolutely fine. You can do it through the chat function, and there will be a Q&A session at the end as well. The event will be recorded so we can share it with those who are unable to attend today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to old Radleyan Henry Hereford, actor and producer, best known for his roles in Crossbones alongside John Malkovich and Claire Foy, and for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and True Blood. When Henry left Radley in 1993, he knew he wanted to become an actor, but not exactly how to go about it. Henry is going to talk about his career pathway, what he learned along the way, and how to gain greater awareness as an actor through trying out things like writing, producing, coaching, and publishing. I'm going to hand you over to Henry. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. And yeah, so as Caroline said, I left Radley knowing I wanted to be an actor, but I wasn't sure how that was going to happen. And the first thing I'll say to you, there are no rules, and you'll be given a lot of advice on how this is the way you should do things. And my experience is that you should try, well, particularly within, from my experiences, you can try there are many different routes to take. I decided to go and get a degree, not in acting. I decided to get a degree in politics, which was, for me, it was the right thing to do. So when I came out of university, I knew even more that that's what I wanted to do. But while I was at university, I decided that I would learn about my industry from the other side. So I went and worked for a casting director, a very well-known casting director in London. I opened a book at the time. It was called Contact. It's now all online, but it was a book which basically listed every casting director, every agent in the UK. And I just started writing letters. It was before email. So I wrote to as many of them as I could, because I wanted to understand, as an actor, the first person that will receive your material, your headshot, your CV, when you're being pitched for a job, will be the casting director. They are essentially the gatekeepers of the industry. They will decide whether to bring you in for an audition. So I needed to learn, I felt, how it works from their point of view. So I would see how they, looked after, worked out which actors they would choose and what actors were presenting the right materials. So I went and worked for this casting director over a summer, and on a huge play festival. So we had very high profile actors working on short plays, but they were high profile at the time. So I came in and did everything. I was photocopying scripts. I was contacting agents to try and get their clients to come in. I had a list every morning of the agents, the actors that I needed to try and bring in, that the casting director, through the directors, had really wanted to come in. So I then, began dealing with agents on a daily basis. So I was like, well, right, now I need to go and work for an agent, because I need to understand how that works. And so that's what I did. An agent that I built up a relationship with while I was working for the casting director, I then contacted them and they brought me in to come and work with them. And I then learned how to pitch actors to the casting directors for the jobs. And I realized then that I still wanted to be an actor after all of that. And I applied for drama school. And back then, it was probably the only way really into the industry is to go to a drama school, which that involves auditioning, and often 2 or 3 auditions to get in. I would say now, and I'll sort of touch on it later, that I don't think today it's necessarily the only way to get experience and to start working as an actor. So while I was, I applied for drama school, I made my selection and I went there. And obviously drama school is incredibly important, particularly with the theatre. You learn so many skills that are vital if you're going to perform on stage, like movement, voice, and you get to perform a lot on stage. So again, it's really important. But back when I was doing it, we had 1 day a year, maybe, that we touched on screen work, which is very different today. But it was something that even that 1 day really made me realize that's where as much as I love the theatre, it was where I wanted to channel my efforts as an actor. I really wanted to work on film and television. So I left drama school. I worked in London on some short films. It's a great way. Now I would say it's very easy to start making your own short films, and I would encourage that. But back when I finished, it was you would often be trying to get into other short films and build a reel. So I started. I had an agent at the time who would put me up for short films. I didn't have it, so I had to build a reel. Is what you need, so that then your casting directors can watch your reel when your agent submits you for the role, and then they'll offer you an audition. So without anything, you have to start somewhere, and short films are a great way to start. And student films, you often don't get paid for them, but you get some footage, you get a chance to build your CV essentially. So that's what I did. I also decided myself that I didn't always want to live in the UK. I wanted to experience living across the world, but I equally wanted to keep pursuing my career. I decided to randomly go to Australia to work as an actor, which most people were going the other way, but I made it work. And I, again, continued what I was doing by learning about their industry, finding out how it worked there, getting into short films there, working a little bit in television, getting an agent. It's a much smaller industry. I mean, there are less jobs, but it was, in a way, for me, a little easier to kind of get more known with casting directors and directors because it was so small. And for me, it really worked. And at the time, there was a lot of work going on there from overseas, but eventually it got to a point where everyone was leaving and going to the US. I returned to the UK and continued to try and get into the industry here. I decided that I would try everything to try and get into the industry here, and I ended up working on someone's film with them as an assistant, and then they gave me a role in it. It wasn't huge, but it only added to my CV further. And at that point, I realized that I really wanted to progress, move forwards. And while I've been working in Australia, everyone had been moving to the United States. So I had a lot of contacts there. I built up a lot of friends who were actors. So I decided to make that move. And I went over in 2008 and started taking classes. And that's the great thing about the US, which is now happening in the UK. And it's exciting for any of you that want to become actors, because it's now, when I left, there wasn't this idea of continuous training. You went to drama school and then you waited essentially for work. Whereas now, I think the US way of doing things is that you keep training. You keep, you wouldn't run a marathon without having run, trained for it, essentially. So I started training back, as an actor, but in the evenings, and I was training with people who I would see on TV during the week. They were not just assuming, not just because they had a job, that they didn't need to train anymore. So it was a really exciting place to be in that, from that perspective. And that's when I started really building my credits. I ended up working on a Nickelodeon television show, and then that followed with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with David Fincher, and then I did a couple of other television shows, and then I got a TV show called Crossbones with John Malkovich and Claire Foy, and that was really one of the most amazing experiences for me as an actor, and especially to go on location. I literally found out on a Friday night. Well, first of all, I auditioned by tape, which is now, because of COVID, is now the normal in the UK, but that's it. In the US, it's been a normal way of doing things for a long time, because a lot of times the producers are not in LA, so they need the tapes wherever they are. If they're shooting in New Orleans or if they're shooting in New York, you go and you'll tape at home. You'll set up your audition, your iPhone on its tripod, and get a friend to read the other lines, and then you edit it all together and then send it to your agent who sends it off. So I had auditioned for Crossbones via tape. Everyone had, I believe, because the casting director was in New York, so she couldn't hold any sessions. And then 2 weeks later, I was told I had been offered the part, and it was one episode, but I'd have to fly out to Puerto Rico for about 5 weeks, because they were bringing in it was a pirate show. So it was set in the 1700s, and they were bringing in real ships from Spain. So I would need to be there for the whole time, which was pretty exciting. So I was told I had the job on the Friday, and I flew out on the Monday. And then while I was there, I got to experience one of the most, why I'd become an actor. So I was now on this show with these incredible actors on location, and working with some of the most skilled people that I'd ever met. Like, we had, for example, my cabin on my ship in the 1700s was inside a warehouse in a box, but when you walked into the box, it was as if it was a ship from that time period. With quills, with bookshelves and lamps and everything, and we had explosions, and then we had the real ships that we would then film the exteriors on, where we were taken out on speedboats into the middle of the ocean. We got on the boat, got everyone ready, and then the director came in a helicopter and did the take from there. So you can imagine it was pretty exciting, and I was quite sad towards the end, because I was only doing one episode. My character had been murdered, so I was going home. There was no doubt about it. But just before I was due to leave, the showrunner, so the creator of the show, who is there, he wrote it, and his name is Neil Cross, and he wrote a British TV show called Luther, and recently another show called The Sister. He came up to me and told me that he really wanted me to stay. I wasn't quite sure how that would work, considering my character was dead. But he had decided there was another character in the show that he thought I would be great for, and he wanted to somehow keep me there. And they'd obviously have to change maybe unrecognizable, because they couldn't know it was me. And so we went, and obviously when you're working on a television show in the US, there are hundreds and hundreds of producers It was with NBC as a network, so you've got all these people that have a say in what happens, and often it's out of your control quite often. But he was able to convince one of the producers who was a bit skeptical to do a hair and makeup test and see if it would work. And so on my last day as the other character, I was whisked into the makeup and hair into the where they do the trying to think of the word now, but basically I went in there and they into the trailer, and they didn't know really what they were doing. And the great thing was, and part of the whole experience being an actor, is I'd spent 5 weeks with the amazing people who did the hair and did the makeup. So we had a rapport, and so they were just like, well, we know we've got to do something. And I was playing a sort of guy who lived in the forest, who made bombs for John Malkovich's character Blackbeard, and they knew I had to look different, and they had this wig that was going to have to be used. So they went to work, and just when they finished, there was no one around. So they decided to bundle me in the van to lunch, and I joined the queue and stood next to the producer that had an issue, and he just looked at me like I was an extra. And then I obviously revealed who I was, and he had no choice then but to allow me to come back and do that role. And I came back for another 6 or 7 episodes to the end of the series, and obviously became a huge part of my life and my acting career. And then Neil has since become a great friend and put other bits of material in front of me. And I think it was just, I think sometimes for me it probably took longer than many other people to get to that point in my career, but I think I wanted to continuously do it, and I never stopped wanting to be an actor, and I tried every way round, kept working on my craft, kept keeping in touch with people, and also being aware that sometimes you're sort of the moment where your skills and everything you've worked for will come into its own at a different time. And I think but it's different for everyone. But I think I'm a sort of an example of kind of pursuing it for a while before what would be termed a big break. I mean, I worked along the way and did various different roles, but the big role for me where things really changed, came perhaps a little later than people that I went to drama school with. But I think that's what I would say, is that there's no right path. If it's something that you want to pursue, if you really, really want to do it, there's no a particular way of doing it, I would say. And I think compared to when I was doing it, there are so many more options, particularly with film and television. I mean, I don't believe it's you don't have to go to drama school for 3 years. I think there are many ways in which you can get skills, particularly with camera. It's a totally different way of acting, and you can learn a lot of that by taking short courses or working yourself and practicing, which is what I would say now to my younger self if I was perhaps coming into the industry now. And I would say, and also there are many, since I've done Crossbones, I worked on a film 2 years ago, and I knew the producer on the show who brought me on, and they asked me if I would help producing, and I didn't know anything about producing, but actually I did. I'd worked on a television show. I made a real, out of my own interest, I made an effort to understand what every job was particularly in a television show, which is hundreds and hundreds of people. And when I worked on Crossbones, every day you would get a call sheet that you were working, which had lists, what scenes you were doing, what time you were being picked up, what time you'd be working, what time you would be finishing. And on the back, it would list every single person working on that production, from people in the offices all the way back in LA to, lighting, to production management, to costume. And I used to go back to the hotel every day and look at the list and try and make sure I could picture every person on that page in my head, so that when I saw them the next day or in a week's time, if they weren't working that day, I would know their name and it would build the relationships. And I think that's one of the most things that I think has kept me moving forwards and getting more networking, in a sense, if you like to call it that. But like, building relationships is really important, especially with crew and all the people that you work with, because I think I see a lot of actors, particularly on American television, they just think it's all about them and what they do. And it certainly helped me. Now I'm producing. I've just produced a film that finished, that I wasn't in as an actor, but it starred Andrea Riseborough and Alison Janney, which we just finished just before Christmas. And it was an incredible experience to be on that from the beginning, when my friend first found the script, to try but because I think I've always had an interest in what other people do around you when you're a team. Everyone has their job to do, and it means that the production is a success, and you have as few. I mean, obviously, when you're doing a huge TV show, there are going to be things that come up, but if it's a happy set where the relationships are working very well and everyone respects what everyone does, then it's an incredible experience. And when also working with that show is the #1 on our list with John Malkovich, who I'm sure you all know is an incredible actor, but he's also an incredible person. And the #1 on the call sheet, so the most important person or the leading person, they lead as if, and so everyone else follows by example because of his amazing leadership. It was an incredible experience for all of us. And I think I would say now the pandemic has, theatres are closed, and there is less work out there, but I think there'll be, I feel very positive about the next step, particularly with film and television. I think we've become much more, or we've adapted. People, technology is much easier to use, it's much cheaper. And I think if any of you are looking to get into the industry as actors, or even thinking about other areas of the industry, you have the ability now to create your own work for nothing all the time, and get yourself into a place where you can come into the industry. There's so many ways that you can showcase your material. So yeah, that's what I would say in that respect. And then so that's my story.
Thank you, Henry. We've actually got a question on the chat already from Mr. Pullen. If he was new to the industry, how does he find a good agent? Is it easy to persuade an agent to take you on?
No, what I would say is you never want to persuade an agent to take you on. And any time you go for an agent interview, you have to remember you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And I think I would say, as an actor, yes, you're creative and you have those skills, but you also have to think of yourself as a business. You run every single department within your business. So you have to decide where you're going to allocate resources if that, if you're going to, do that workshop that you wanted to do, can you afford to do that within your business? And I think the same is with agents. And I think I learned that along the way. Initially, when I came out of you know, and I wish someone had told me that when I came out of drama school. The idea, and I think it was a little bit more closed, it definitely was more closed shop when I came out of drama school, because I think then you really had to have an agent, and it was impressed upon you. Now, I mean, you do need one to an extent, that some of the bigger jobs always go through agents. But at the end of the day, when you're starting out, you're building. And I think if you look at it that way, rather than, you know, you can go, if you come out of drama school or you have a couple of short films, you can join Spotlight, which is the platform where all your stuff is stored. So you know your CV, your headshots, all those skills that you have, or your show reel. And then, you know, before you have an agent, they allow you to self-submit to various, not everything, but to things that, so you therefore have a little way in, and you can submit for short films, you can submit for you know, student films, and sometimes some bigger things. If you have a skill that no one else has, often casting directors on big shows, particularly period shows, if you can ride a horse really well, and you've got that, you know, and you have to be sure you can, because otherwise, you know, people have got into trouble for saying they can do something and they can't. But you know, that, you know, you could end up on something, an opportunity could arise if you can do that. And that's when often casting directors will look outside the box. You know, they'll go onto Spotlight, and they'll put it out to everyone, to all actors that aren't represented, and the agents. You know, they're looking for someone who can speak French and ride a horse, for example. And if you can do that, you're going to get a chance. And I think, and sometimes agents come along they'll come along at the right time. I mean, I know my manager in LA, who I've been with for 12 years now, I wrote to him a year before and he never replied. I never got any response. I moved, you know, things happened. I had someone else looking after me. And then I tried again a year later, and he replied straight away and brought me in to the office, and here we are. And then he kept calling me after I'd been in, knowing I had a couple of other meetings at the time. And he kept saying, and that's the way it should be. I suddenly realized then that is the way it should be. They should be calling you. And then you might walk out of a meeting with an agent and go, you know what? I don't like them. They might be, you know, working at independent, but they may not be for you. And I know, for example, people that I went to drama school with, a couple of them got taken on by, you know, I mean, a couple of them don't exist anymore, but at the time they were you know, it was like you came out dreaming, oh, if only they'd take me on. And some people did get taken on, but they, after 6 months, if they weren't booking a job, they were sort of not with them anymore. So sometimes it's all, and you never, and the one thing I would say is never compare yourself to other people, to your peers, because it just doesn't work, because everyone is unique in what they give as an actor. It's just, you know, it's like someone will get that role over some, you know, sometimes it does happen that someone gets a role because they know someone, but ultimately you'll get the role if it's because so many people are involved in the process, particularly in film and television, that you have to just focus on what you can control. So if you get an audition, you work really hard on it. You know it better than you think you know it. And then you go into the audition and you walk in, you have to walk in, forget everything you've been working hard on, and do the work. And then after that, when you walk, you can walk out going, I know I did my best work. Then everything else is irrelevant, because, you know, you could go in and then they've changed the role to a woman. You could go in and they've cut the role, which has happened more, to me, at least 2 or 3 times. Or And even before, I've been working on the audition, and then they've called up and said, no, it's not happening because that role's been cut. But often you won't know that. You will just think, I didn't get the role. And so the more you can walk out of an audition and forget about it, the easier it will be to go into the next one. Because I think you can't, you realize when you work in television, you know, the number of people, producers that will have been sent, now it's all tape, which is great because it means you've got a lot more access, but people will have seen your work and they will have chimed in and said, oh, I don't know, or, you know, and then you've got the thing where someone happens to know someone, it's their cousin or their niece, or, and there's nothing you can do about that. But one day you might be in that position that gets, because you know someone. And I think you just have to kind of keep, you have to be patient and not necessarily, and to just see how things go. And as long as you're doing your best work, and the right thing will come up. And I know, you know, often you might go in for a show 8 times, and then the 9th time you'll get the job.
Yes,
but it won't be anything to do.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's like any job interview. I think that you just cannot take it personally. You really need to just keep going and be resilient. We've got a couple more questions on the chat here. We have one about show reels on behalf of the 6-1. So if you don't have a professional screen work to use on a show reel, would you recommend using a specific company who produce show reels?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think they are so good now. And again, do your research, because there will be some that are better than others. And, you know, but, you know, probably 2 or 3 years ago, I was still hearing, and in the UK, that casting directors were like, well, you know, don't put it on your reel if it's, you know, not professional, we can tell. But actually if they can't, quite often I've seen them look at people's reels and not know, but because the footage is so good. If you can find someone that can give you, what I would say is find someone who can write a few lines. You decide in your head what you say to them. I want 3 scenes, and that's probably a good way to start. 2 or 3 scenes that show me as this kind of character or that kind of character. And then if they can write you, or between you and friends that know you well, can write a small scene, but where you are the only person talking, but there's someone in the scene that you can see. So it's like it's been extracted from a Holby City or a Casualty, for example, and we're just seeing that small moment of you. Then I think it's a great way to start building reels, because it's hard with short films and student films, because you do the work, you then have to wait for the footage, then you are hoping the footage is going to be the best. The bit you did is going to be easy to edit out onto a reel, and also how long they're going to take to get it to you. So I think these companies are, do your research, but I think some of them probably are really good. And I've seen some in the US that are incredible. And I've seen them. They put a bit of music underneath. It's like you're watching like 5 seconds of Silent Witness, for example. But it's enough to start, you know, building, because essentially if you've got something that you in a hospital bed, for example, talking to a doctor, but we just see you, you know, and the acting's good, then that might be enough for an agent to take you on and then submit you to Casualty. And they'll go, fine, we know he can do Casualty, you know, a person in, you know, someone that's, you know, had appendix out or something, for example, and then they'll bring you in for the audition. So I think there's a bit of snobbery around there about putting those kind of reels together. I disagree with that, because I've seen it work, and then once you start getting, you know, your professional work on there, you just start moving things off. You mix and match, and you've got to constantly keep your reel up to date. But I think there are no rules, in the sense of if it's professional and the acting's good, they won't notice.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henry. Another question on the chat here. I'm thinking of doing a degree before going into the acting industry, similar to yourself, Henry. How much do you recommend taking part in the uni acting clubs like Footlights? Oh, a couple of questions in here. So taking part in the clubs, how necessary is it to work in between projects? And for how long did you have to wait before you got an audition for a show? If you can't remember all that, then come back to me and I'll remind you.
I think if you want to go, I mean, for me, I'm really glad I went to university because I obviously I left Radley. I was 17, I think, just turning on 18. And drama school is a very intense period of time. And I think in my year, there may have been 40 of us. And I think for me, going to university was really, really important. Just to get a bit of life experience. I didn't do anything drama-wise while I was there. I spent time on the other side. Although I did join an extras agency in Bristol, and I did work as an extra on Casualty because it was used to be filmed at Bristol, and I then had to kind of wipe it. No one could know about it because again there was snobbery about you can never let anyone you know you're an extra, which again I think is crazy, but it's one of those things. But it actually also it gave me experience being on a set. I had no idea necessarily how things worked, and there's a lot of sitting around doing that. But if you're interested and intrigued, you get paid and you get fed, and you get to see what's going on. I mean, some people do it as a living. Or they did, but for me I think I'd finished exams one year in Bristol, and I decided to see if I could get some experience. So why not get paid and learn how it works? The more you understand these, that kind of thing, and that's why I would say while you're at university and doing drama clubs, whatever you're interested in, if you want to, get involved, you should get involved. But also I think you can learn about other parts of the industry. You can start putting your own stuff together. I would if you're interested in film and television, take a camera class when you can, even if it's just learn. It's so important to know how you individually come across on camera, because it's very different to what you think, and not in a bad way, but it's just, I think if you understand how the camera works and what the camera picks up on, it's really interesting, and it can be really fun because you can see by record, and you have the ability to do this kind of thing yourself. Like you can take an out on camera class, and it's a skill in just the technical of where to stand, where you should be looking, and how you can have a conversation with someone who's actually over here, but you, for the sake of the camera angle, you need to be talking there. So it's all those things that you would never do on a stage, but they're vital to know that when you get on the set and someone talks about cheating someone out of the shots, you understand what's going on. And I think you can practice all that stuff. And I think there's more and more on camera stuff going on in the UK now, and especially with Zoom, it's like you're on camera anyway, so you can do a lot of watching classes, and once you come out of Zoom, essentially, I think it'll still be used a lot. But that's long answer, but I would get involved in as much as you want to get involved. That gives you more understanding of what you want to do.
The final question was on the question. No, it's okay. For how long did you have to wait before you got an audition for a show?
It's one of those things where I'm trying to think. Way back then, I know in the US, I probably didn't. It's probably about a month or two that I waited, and then it was one of the worst auditions I've ever had, because I put too much. It was an audition for Mad Men. It was one episode, but I put so much on that audition, and rather than just honing in on the character and what I needed to do, and going, and then so everything else threw me, in a sense that we were all lined up in a corridor going in one by one, and the guy that had wrote and created the show was sitting on a couch inside. When they don't necessarily, producers don't normally come to the room anymore because they don't need to. But yeah, so but I've had periods of time where I've had several months between auditions, and that's when you need to make sure that you're keeping yourself ready for it, so that you're not, when the audition comes in, you're not going, oh, I have to get this otherwise, because I haven't been in for an audition. Because when you walk in that room, they know that. They will know. They don't know exactly. They can feel that you are coming in because you desperately need that job, whereas they want you to come in just to come in and do the work and connect and leave. And so the more you're training and practicing, and it doesn't have to be hugely expensive, because you can practice with friends, you can put stuff. And what I would say now is you can definitely keep a full-time job going with, but keep this, if finance to get into, drama school is very expensive, and a lot of being setting up can be, but I think now you can, there's so many ways of doing, even, getting your skills up in the meantime. And yeah, practicing, keeping, like being in a gym, I guess.
Out of interest, do you still get nervous, and how do you handle your nerves if you do still get nervous?
Yeah, of course. I think you wouldn't. I think you kind of probably don't do your best work if you're not a bit nervous. And I think it's just trying to channel into the part, because everyone's got some. Even if you're, robbing a bank as a character, you're going to be nervous that it's not going to go well, or it might, you might get caught. So it's finding those. That's where you would channel the nerves that you are going, and then that's going to feed into the character. I think if you try and never ever try and get rid of nerves, because that will just, it will never, you'll just look like you're trying to not be nervous, and it won't go well. So you should just definitely, lean into that. But I think the more prepared you are, the less. I think there's a difference between being nervous, like I haven't done enough work on this, to I'm just generally nervous about walking into a room. And I think also have one thing I'd say as a casting director always told me is, I think we often as actors put them in, and directors much, and like they're standing above us, like they have control, we're coming in and they're control. Whereas I think if you come in with the attitude that you're on the same level, that you're there to collaborate and give them an option, and then it feels less like you're being judged. I think it's just coming in and going, like you would in any job. I'm here to give a presentation. If you like it, great, we can talk further. If you don't, that's really lovely to meet you. Because I think as an actor, you have to remember, casting directors don't just cast that one thing. They cast hundreds, and they move on, and they cast, so you have to book the room, because you want the casting director, because you're never going to get every job. That's the reality of it. So I think if you go in with the attitude that the casting director goes, you know what, or the director or producer, whatever, whoever makes the final decision, says, they're just not right for this, but I really like them. So they'll remember you. And that's happened to me before, where someone said, oh, we thought you were great, and you don't get the job, and then 2 years later they call you because nothing's come up in that 2 years that you've been right for, but they hadn't forgotten because you made an impression on them. So it's kind of building your relationships in that sense.
You talked about thinking of yourself as a business, as an actor earlier. What are the other qualities do you think that it takes to succeed, if you were going to pare it down?
Well, I think I've sort of touched it. Well, patience is definitely something you need to have, and not take it personally, and just being able to sort of let it go. And also, I think also I sort of slightly touched on it in don't compare, because I think that's, I see some of the most, I've seen, colleagues of mine, well, peers of mine as actors over the years who've really been, it's really messed up their, well, not messed up their career, but they've not been satisfied because they've continually compared their careers with other people, and it's eaten away at them. And I think then it becomes, and I would say that's a really important skill to remember anyway. I mean, I think most jobs you shouldn't just generally compare yourself to other people, because I think, but particularly in this job, because it can be so easy to say when you get, you get an audition, you get auditions sometimes where you're like, oh, I could play that, but then you'll get other ones where you really connect with the character, you really feel it's you, and you do a really great job, and you feel it's your job. But I think that can be slightly dangerous in a sense, because you become so attached to it, and then the other person gets it, and you start trying to go, well, what did they have that I didn't have? And it's a rabbit hole that you shouldn't go down. And I think, looking at yourself as a business in the sense of be one thing really 100%. I think a lot of actors particularly try and be something they're not, then they want to play everything. And I think until you've reached a point in your career where you have that flexibility to say to someone, that you're that well known, or that you can go off and do something different. But I think for me, it's working out where you fit in the industry, particularly in film and television. It's like, what kind of type are you? And even ask your friends, write down 20 things that you think of, about, what kind of thing, people I would play, because it will just help you understand, get yourself in the best. So you want to be 100, the best version of you when you go into that room. And I think the problem is a lot of actors, when they get a knockback, they go, well, I'm doing something wrong. I need to change. I need to be like this. And then they'll cast me in that. And that can be sort of a big mistake in a sense, because, we all want to be versatile. And I think, some actors are more versatile than others, but I think the actors that succeed the most really know who they are and pursue that. And if, a year goes by where you're not, they're not looking for your type of person, that's just the way it is. But a year later or 6 months later, you could then go in, 5 times a week, because your type is being looked at. And I think there's nothing wrong with being typecast. Someone like Hugh Grant made a living out of it. Most actors make a living out of being typecast, because they've worked out who their audience are and they play to their audience. And I think that I think it's always been used as a kind of a negative thing to be typecast. But I actually think it's, it's a skill to know what you can play and what you can play well. And once you know that, I think you're in a much better place, because you'll then book you'll book, or you'll at least go in and do a great book every room that you go into doing that role.
Thank you.
That's where patience comes in, I think.
Yeah. Another question on the chat here. If you're very young, say 14, and very keen to get into the acting world, would you advise on waiting or going for it?
I don't know. I mean, you could try. I mean, I think you certainly can try. I don't think you also have to remember that you don't, if you're not enjoying it, you can stop doing it. I think if you're really passionate about it, and there are lots of roles for younger people, and if you're skilled at it, you could there are ways to see if you can get it. And it's a lot easier to get an agent if you're 14 than it is if you're 24, because agents and managers are not going to have you are not expecting a reel, because when have you done one? You know what I mean? Because you're young. So I mean, it's a case of you could look and see if agents are send your material to agents, see if they're looking. That's another thing, is that your parents could, do a bit of research, find out who are the best young. I guess you'd be like a children's agency, I guess, still, or young adult department. I don't know exactly how they work, but again, that's a resource that your parents could go to in the Spotlight, which produces this online directory called Contacts. It used to be a book that came out, now it's all online. So that's a way to go and do research and find out, okay, who are the best agencies that look after people of this age, and and then start making contact and saying, get headshots. Again, the Contact provides headshot photographers, and particularly there would be headshot photographers that specialize in younger people. But I don't know. I think if I'm honest, if someone that was available to me, I would have probably I knew and I was doing plays at Radley from like 14. The main play, I had a tiny role, I think, when I maybe was in the second year, I think. So I knew then. So yeah, if that kind of thing was an option, I probably would have pursued it. You never know.
Thank you, Henry. I see that you've we've discussed that you've worked abroad in the US and Australia. Would you recommend going and working abroad as a route for actors to expand their skill sets and their knowledge and go after new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to want to live in those places. I think importantly, like I've been to Australia a few times. I knew I liked it, and I knew I wanted to live there. So, but I also wanted to keep working as an actor. But I don't think I could have gone somewhere purely to be an actor. Just change the scene. As I had to enjoy. The lifestyle had to appeal. The same with LA. I went and visited first, and I always say to other actors, who go, they want to leave the UK and go across, and obviously there's the visa issues and all those things to be able to work there legally. But also I went there to go, what, I've never been to LA, can I live here? Because you aren't going to be, in an ideal world, you're on a show for the moment you land, but the reality is it doesn't work like that. So you have to enjoy it, and it's not for everyone. And I think now we're in a different position to when I moved there, because I think a lot of people who were living in LA when I was there, they now live where they want, because so much is not filmed there. It's filmed outside of, in other cities. So they live elsewhere. They just have to get to the job. They send a tape. It's where it's all going now. And I think, I send tapes. I live in London, but I send tapes to the US. I just have to make sure that I can get to the job if I get offered it. The other thing I would say is what I'd probably do if I was doing things again is Canada, particularly Vancouver, has a huge, it's like a mini Hollywood. It has, I think, maybe 30, 40 television shows and films outside of COVID, obviously, but they are back up on working on some of them. And I think for Brits, you can get, when you're under 30, I believe you can get a year working visa in Canada. Don't quote me, but I believe you can. And lots of people I knew from Australia and the UK have since gone over to Vancouver. They can work. They don't have a problem. They can work for, they can work in a bar as well, or a restaurant, whatever they need to do. But then the great thing about the shows that are filmed in Canada, the US shows, but by law, they film in Canada to get tax breaks and incentives to film there. And as a kind of, the flip side of that is the show has to hire a certain amount of local based actors. So they won't fly. They'll fly a certain amount of actors up from LA, but then the smaller roles, 2 lines, 1 line, they cast locally. And if you've got a bit of, a CV going on, you've done a little bit here and there, and you can get to, Vancouver, you can get an agent. I know actors have got agents there and then worked on huge shows. They just happened to shoot them there. And then they've come down to LA afterwards, but with a huge body of work, even in smaller roles, but they're ready to move up to the next level. It's one way of doing things. It's not the only way to do something. But again, if you love Canada, you love the outside, being outside, it's an option. It's available. And I know people have made it work, and then they've worked on, 5 or 6 shows doing 2 or 3 lines here and there, but they have those shows on their resume. And then it means that they get in more doors. Again, and equally, I've known people go to Atlanta where there's about 25, but again, you have to want to live in Atlanta, which is not everyone's cup of tea, but it's cheaper to live there, although you still need the visa. But again, I think one thing I would, I keep going back to it, there's no right way of doing it. And I think if you want to go and live in Canada, Toronto also has quite a few shows there. It may be a way, and you can do it quite easily because of the working visa.
Brilliant, thank you. Final question from me, I'm just conscious of time. Who would you like to work with next?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I would like to work with, there's so many actors in the UK.
Only pick one, Henry, only pick one.
I would love to work with like someone like Judi Dench before, while she's still working. I think I'm just Ian McKellen. There's so many great actors that I'm not saying they're the older actors that are they're still working, and they've just done so much that I think you can learn. You learn so much from them. I mean, I can't. John Malkovich has become a friend, and he was such an amazing person to work with. And all his body of work, he's got so much to impart to, and is happy to do that. So I think working with people that have been around for a long time and have had so much experience would be a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's a tough question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Henry. That was absolutely invaluable. Really, loads of useful career advice there. So thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Pleasure.
We've learned so much. We're really grateful. Thank you. Now, before we all go, I'm just going to tell you about the career talks that we've got coming up for the rest of the week. On Wednesday, we're going to be starting to focus on the concept of entrepreneurism. So Doug Carr, entrepreneur and CEO of handbag company Melly Mello, will talk to you about the highs and lows of his career and what qualities he thinks you'll need to make a successful entrepreneur. And on Friday, we have Hannah Bauer, Global Leadership Development Lead at Vodafone, great title, and a graduate recruitment expert. He'll talk to you about the value of pursuing multiple careers in your lifetime. Thank you, everyone, for attending this event, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our future talks. And thank you, Henry. Bye-bye, everyone.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.